Welcome back to Life's Chillin'. My name is Avital, and I'm so excited today to talk about Parshat Bereshit, the very first Torah portion in the 5 books of Moses. We had just concluded the wonderful high holiday season, and with the conclusion of the holidays at Simchat Torah, we finish reading through the 5 books of Moses and, our Chumash right here, and we start again. We conclude reading the Parsha V'zot HaBracha, which is the very last Torah portion. And because we never really want to finish our learning right away, we start over with Parsha Bereshit, with Genesis. And that is what is the Torah portion for this Shabbos. And I wanted to focus on an idea today about making space. And I'll explain what I mean. When we look at the very beginning of the Torah, so many of us know the famous lines in the beginning of God's creating the heaven and the earth. That's very familiar to us. That's something most people could probably tell you is the way the Bible opens. But what comes after that? What comes right after in the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth? It says, "When the earth was astonishingly empty, with darkness upon the surface of the deep, and the divine presence hovered upon the surface of the waters, God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." So what this is basically saying is that in the beginning of the world, all that existed, there was nothing except for God's divine presence, for his light. That was the only thing filling the world, and it took up all of the space there was in the world, where the entire earth and all the other planets and the atmosphere, everything was just God's presence. So keep that idea in mind, and I'm going to circle back to it in a minute. I've been reading this book by Michal Oshman, and she is the head of culture for TikTok in Europe. And it's been a really good book. It's called What Would You Do If You Weren't Afraid? And in this book, she shares a very cool idea that I really liked and I thought was the perfect sort of partner for Bereshit, for the creation story. She shares this idea that is a Kabbalistic idea from the classic Kabbalistic text Eitz Chaim. And the idea is called Tzimtzum, which means contraction. And essentially, what she is saying, and from this text, Eitz Chaim, what she talks about in her book, is that in the beginning, in creation, all that was there again was God's presence. And in order to create the world, in order to create everything we see now, the planets, earth, plants, life, man, animals, everything, God had to contract. He had to remove this part of himself in order to create space for us, in order to create space for others, and for, again, everything that exists to this day. God had to remove something from himself, remove part of his light to create earth. And it's interesting because we can see as you go through the Genesis story through Bereshit, you see that after each days of creation, God says that what he made was good. And it was good, and it was good, and it was good. He is happy with what he made. He feels fulfilled by what he made. He is not regretful of the beautiful things that he created. He saw that it was good. He saw that what he gave of himself created something that was good. And I thought it was interesting because we see something just like that again when it comes to Adam, the first man, the first living being, the first person. And so when we look at that story, what it says is, "And God formed the man of dust from the ground, and he blew into his nostrils the soul of life, and man became a living being." So that's how Adam was created. But when we look at Eve, when we look at the first woman, it's a little bit different. Essentially, after God creates Adam, after God creates man, there's this other verse. And it says over here, it says, "Hashem God said, 'It is not good that man be alone. I will make him a helper corresponding to him.'" So God recognizes that man shouldn't be alone. We're not intended to be alone. No man is an island, so to speak. And so God decides to find Adam a companion. And after that, it says that basically God brought all of the animals to Adam, and Adam looked at each and every animal, and he gave them a name. But at the end, after he names all of the animals, it says, "But as for man, he did not find a helper corresponding to him." So Adam saw all the animals that God had created, but none of them were his companion. And so what happens? So God cast a deep sleep upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his sides and filled in flesh in its place. Then Hashem God fashioned the side that he had taken from the man into a woman, and he brought her to the man. So God took, and what is a classical interpretation is he took one of the ribs of Adam, and he used that to form woman, to form Eve. And the man said, "This time it is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This shall be called woman, for from man was she taken." So Adam's finally happy. Something was removed from him. His rib was taken from him and formed into this woman, and he's finally found his companion. None of the animals were it for him, but this woman who was formed from him, he had to take something of himself to create her, is what made him happy. And so I see this commonality between God removing some of his divine light to make the earth and to make the world, and Adam having his rib removed in order to create woman who was going to be his partner for life. And so I think that we can really learn from them the value of making space for others, making space for ourselves. And so I want to propose 3 ways that we can work on making space, or sort of 3 categories of making space for others. So the first one is, I'm going to steal the term that they use often in therapy or in counseling called holding space. So holding space literally means being physically, mentally, and emotionally present for someone. And so what that means is you're not really thinking about yourself. You are putting yourself aside and truly being present for somebody. You're going to be an active listener, an active participant, and really just be there for someone else. And so it may be something like listening more, or it may be something like putting your preferences aside for the moment when you recognize that somebody else is in need of making the decision or of having some time where they're the ones in the spotlight. It's about making yourself a little bit smaller, contracting yourself, kind of like God did, in order to make space for someone else. But the same is true of ourselves. We can contract sort of our inclinations to make space for improving ourselves. So if you make a fitness goal for this year, and you really are not into waking up early, and you're really not into doing something, you don't really like exercise, but you have this goal, you have to sort of contract that inclination, suppress it, so to speak, in order to do something that's going to make you feel good. It's going to be just like God at the end of each day saying, "And it was good." You have to work hard. You have to push past your hesitations, your doubts, whatever those inclinations are, to say, "Oh, I'm just not going to do it." And you have to push those things down in order to achieve success. And the third idea is just to leave sort of a void, to leave an empty space within yourself, to make space for something great that could come. Whether that's a relationship, a job opportunity, a friendship, like whatever that happens to be. If you feel completely full, if you don't feel like there's any more you could take on, then you're closing the door to so many opportunities that could come your way. And so I think it's okay to even leave a void, to leave space, to leave extra time in our days to be filled sort of as a wild card option. So to summarize, the 3 points, the 3 ways that we can continue to make space and to take after the traits of Adam and of God are 1, to make space for others, meaning that we're going to be present for them. 2, to make space for ourselves. And 3 is to just leave space to be filled by something wonderful, something unexpected. And so I think, again, if we can all look at the way that God and Adam contracted of themselves, made themselves, took something from themselves to create something beautiful, I think we will be happy and see that it was good. I hope you all have a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you next time.